I think there's been a post recently on Twitter that was Willy Woo or Adam Back, I forget. It was kind of bringing up Hal Finney's old posts where he was talking about Bitcoin back in like 2010 or 11 as potentially one day being worth $10 million because of all the wealth in the world being worth 200 trillion. If Bitcoin gets 10% of that or something like that, it'd be $10 million, I think was the number, the math. And then Willie, I think, replied that he like ran the numbers and like global wealth is actually like since then gone to like 500 trillion or something. So in the last 10 years, like the amount of wealth in the world has gone up significantly. So he was actually saying like, oh, we should probably adjust that number higher, that 10 million that Al Finney says probably should be 20 million to adjust for inflation.
This week, we are talking about the gift of Bitcoin with Bitcoin angel investor and entrepreneur Brad Mills. Bitcoin teaches all kinds of lessons and makes people's lives better. And Brad's joined us to share some of his personal stories being in Bitcoin since 2011. I'm Scott Dietels. I'm the CEO and founder of Block Rewards, and part of our mission in bringing Bitcoin to the workplace is helping people understand how it will help them. There's all kinds of knowledge that Bitcoiners who've been around a long time have to impart, and Brad is definitely one of those people. I learned a lot in this conversation, and I hope you enjoy. All right, welcome to another episode of the Block Reward podcast. This is our Christmas Eve edition. We are joined by Canadian Bitcoin advocate and entrepreneur Brad Mills for an all Bitcoin Santa beard episode. Brad, welcome to the show.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. I grew this for you. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I saw you had a tweet the other day that got me thinking about the holiday spirit.
I got to go over to my yellow bear here and put my on air sign on. There we go.
We are on
now
air.
It's official. Yeah, now it's official.
Your tweet was that Bitcoin taught you to save like Scrooge and give like Santa. I thought that was a great place to start. We're in the holiday spirit, thinking about how Bitcoin has changed your life. You've been in Bitcoin for a long time, and how long? 2011, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it's 2011. That's 13 years, if I do the math correctly. I've learned a lot of lessons over the last 5 epochs. This is the 5th epoch for me in Bitcoin. So yeah, man, it's been a lot of learning and just confidence building over time. And it's funny because I just only like finally got to the point after 12 years in Bitcoin, like earlier this year, where I realized like I don't need to be afraid of anything stopping Bitcoin anymore. Like I used to kind of have these things of, oh my God, Roger Ver is going to ruin Bitcoin because he owns Bitcoin.com. He's going to distract everybody with BCH. And oh my God, Ethereum is going to take developer mind share and all the Silicon Valley VCs are going to pile their money into Ethereum. And oh my God, there's going to be a global depression and it's going to set us back like 4 years. Like it just, at this point, like it's inevitable. And I've just been focusing on harnessing the inevitability of Bitcoin. And it just had this epiphany one day. It was like January, February, as I was like disconnecting from politics and Twitter drama and stuff. And I was just like, what if Bitcoin is inevitable? And what do I do then? If it's a guarantee that Bitcoin is going to be a global reserve asset over the next 10 years, I should just become the person that can handle that level of wealth and just do whatever I possibly can and not sell any sats. So that's what I've been focused on the last year.
Yeah, it's funny. I guess you hear about the kinds of things that were keeping people up at night. You know, the block size wars is a great example. And flash forward, it's almost 2025, and now people are worried about whether or not Microsoft will vote to own Bitcoin on their balance sheet, which they did not do on this time around. But we're now talking about Brazil and the biggest companies in the world looking at Bitcoin as a serious thing that they need to be investing in and working into the fabric of how their treasury management works. Like, this feels a lot like it's a gradually and then suddenly and then really suddenly time. Your thoughts on how that's all going?
Well, it might be a little bit controversial, but I don't know if I really think about it like gradually then suddenly. I think about it like gradually and then gradually and then gradually. And then before you know it, over time, it's like a glacier. It's just inevitable as more and more people realize what Bitcoin is. They grok the unique principles of Bitcoin and, you know, the design, the initial design of Bitcoin the game theory plays out. And as there's less Bitcoin available to buy, more and more people start to understand, oh, this thing is long-term, incredibly scarce, like nothing else before. I better stop fighting it. I better start getting some. And, then before you know it, instead of having to sell one Bitcoin to buy your dream home, because a Bitcoin's worth $4 million now, you can just borrow at your bank against Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's just integrated into the financial system and as an asset that just like your equities or your home, that you can borrow for reasonable interest rates. And as that world comes into fruition, you won't need to sell Bitcoin. Like, that's been the biggest mistake that I've made throughout the last 4 epochs, is like having to sell Bitcoin to fund my lifestyle. But yeah, I don't think it needs to be like suddenly. Of course, there's periods of like excitement where there's FOMO and people get irrational and exuberant and all that. But I don't necessarily think that like in this epoch, in the next 3 years or so, we're just going to have like, it's $1 million Bitcoin and everybody gets it. It's still only a small percentage of the world understands Bitcoin. And I think we're going to be fighting that education battle for the next 10 or 20 years, even, to kind of like help people understand what this thing is. But before you know it, 10 years later, it'll be kind of like just a network that they use on a daily basis because everybody's using it. It's just something that they use. Whether or not they're going to be storing all their value in it, I think people will have touch points with Bitcoin, just whether they even know it or not. And maybe that's suddenly, but I do think it's going to take a while. And like in that vein, we should just continue to be patient, continue to like get as much Bitcoin as we can, and try to become the type of person that can hang on to it and solve your Citadel problems without having to sell any Bitcoin.
So maybe for the benefit of our listeners trying to catch up to some of the things that you've learned along the way, what are some of the things that helped you like have this epiphany earlier in the year? The inevitability of Bitcoin. What should somebody try to understand if they're trying to like realize like, well, why?
I mean, I guess it depends on how long you've been in Bitcoin and what the rest of your life looks like. If you're an entrepreneur that is successful and you have like, 6 figures coming in to pay any of your bills that you might have, or 7 figures or something, then your issues may be a little different than like a Bitcoiner who's like all in on Bitcoin. It's kind of like, they don't work, like a lot of early Bitcoiners that don't do a fiat job. They just kind of like retired on Bitcoin. It's tough to survive with that mindset, right? You have to sell some Bitcoin. So that was the thing that I learned, was like, I was kind of an entrepreneur when I found Bitcoin. I was making Facebook apps back in 2008 to 2011 or so. I was making social games basically. And I had some revenue coming in from that. And then I was like unemployable. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that can relate with that. Just, entrepreneurial spirited people who just are kind of unemployable. And there's a lot of those people get attracted to Bitcoin because of, anti-authoritarianism and maybe anarchist leaning values, or seeing through the bullshit and not being able to just keep your mouth quiet when people are being dumb. And, like vaccine mandates helped a lot, like pushed a lot of people over the edge where maybe they were just keeping quiet at their job, just fiat mining. But then they just realize like, what am I, this is totally against my principles. Not saying that everybody has to be on that philosophy, but I guess it's like, I don't understand as much the mindset of the average person these days, because I've been just like all in on Bitcoin for so long. I really understand the mindset of somebody who's all in on Bitcoin. And for that person, I would recommend like, there's a way to rationalize selling Bitcoin as like, you held long enough, and if you're right, the majority of your net worth is still in Bitcoin, and, sell some Bitcoin now to pay off your mortgage and make your wife feel better, or whatever the thing is, like upgrade your car, give yourself the dream car, go on that crazy vacation, whatever it is, like sell some Bitcoin, you deserve it. You can get into that mindset. And a lot of people gave me that advice, trying to make me feel better, I guess. But I kind of wish that I had stuck to my psychopath Bitcoin, mindset somewhat, and was like, no, I'm not going to sell 20 Bitcoin to pay off my $200,000 mortgage. like what the hell? 6 years later, that's worth $20 million. And I much would have rather like stuck with a freaking mortgage for another 6 years and have 20 extra $1 million. Like,
yeah.
Or 2 million, sorry. What are the numbers there? What's the math on that? 20 Bitcoin.
2 million, yeah. Yeah. Still better than the mortgage, or than not having a mortgage.
Still better than paying off a $200,000 mortgage. So, I mean, there's a lot of mistakes that I made over the years where I was just like, oh, I'll buy back lower, like like the COVID crash was a time when I was just stressed out. I was subscribed to Real Vision. And that was my downfall. It's like, like Raoul Paul and all these guys were talking about like diversifying and being a responsible investor and a risky money manager, managing your risk and all this shit. And it was before he got into like becoming a crypto shill. It was like he was bringing on people that were talking about Bitcoin. And so I was like, okay, I'll subscribe to Real Vision because they got, I don't know if Tour de Meester or somebody was coming on, but there was like Bitcoiners were coming on. I was like, exciting. So I started like consuming all this macro content and stuff. And then I started, I guess I'm too heavy weighted in Bitcoin. I need to have mutual funds and I need to have indexes and all this shit. So I guess it's to each his own, right? Like whatever you're comfortable with the risk. But I got into that mindset of like, oh, I'm going to have enough Bitcoin, even if I sell to pay off the mortgage, that if it goes to where I think it's going to go, I'll be great. I'll be fine. But then I met Jason Williams and then Michael Saylor came around and I was like, I had resolved myself to be happy with my amount of Bitcoin and like, I didn't need any more. I'm just going to be, a responsible steward of my Bitcoin. And then I see these guys like stacking 8, 10 Bitcoin at a time, posting it on Twitter. Like Jason Williams always was posting like $500,000 buys at a time on Twitter. I was like, what the hell? I want some of those Bitcoins. Why do they sell? Why did I sell? So yeah, just if you can handle it, like figure out a way to become the type of person that can solve your problems without selling any Bitcoin. That's like, I've been calling it the Citadel mindset. Like develop the strength and the wherewithal and the resourcefulness, if you're an all-in Bitcoiner, to create value in the world and generate revenue so that you can borrow smartly against Bitcoin or generate revenue to pay your lifestyle expenses instead of selling Bitcoin. Because, unless you're going to be happy with like reducing your stack all the time, then you should figure out a way to solve that problem without selling coin. That's the biggest lesson. Just don't be selling Bitcoin. Why did you do that, Brad?
It's like the meme of the guy from Interstellar looking at the past versions of himself, and he's banging on the window like, no, don't, Yeah, I think it's a common mistake people make just investing in general is selling their winners so that they can diversify out into worse performing stuff. And that's probably extra true with Bitcoin, partly because I think a lot of people don't know or have a lot of conviction around how much upside like it remains in front of Bitcoin if it continues to do what people think it will do. You mentioned global reserve asset, and like in that scenario, we're talking about something surely in the probably hundreds of trillions, where Bitcoin today is about $2 trillion US dollars. It's tiny.
I think there's been a post recently on Twitter that was Willy Woo or Adam Back, I forget. It was kind of bringing up Hal Finney's old posts where he was talking about Bitcoin back in like 2010 or 11 as potentially one day being worth $10 million because of all the wealth in the world being worth 200 trillion. If Bitcoin gets 10% of that or something like that, it'd be $10 million, I think was the number, the math. And then Willie, I think, replied that he like ran the numbers and like global wealth is actually like since then gone to like 500 trillion or something. So in the last 10 years, like the amount of wealth in the world has gone up significantly. So he was actually saying like, oh, we should probably adjust that number higher, that 10 million that Hal Finney says probably should be 20 million. To adjust for inflation.
Yeah, and I guess until we stop pricing things, until we start only pricing things in Bitcoin, the theoretical number for what that will have to grow forever as the numbers just get bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Is it actually like, okay, am I doing that wrong? Is it $10 million Bitcoin is what, 200 trillion or 20 trillion?
That's right. Yeah, 200
it's
trillion.
200 trillion. Yeah, okay. So we'd have to see a 10x in global wealth to get to 2 quadrillion. And then Bitcoin's 10% of that at 200 trillion, which, in the next 10, 20 years, it's likely.
Yeah, I think if you include derivatives and debt, it's already over a quadrillion. But that number is tough to pin.
Yeah, derivatives too. It's like that confuses the hell out of me. I tried to dive down that rabbit hole, and it's like so confusing that economists don't even agree on how to think about derivatives as a value thing, because there's like notional value and real value. So like there's like the notional value is something like $4 quadrillion of derivatives are out there, but a lot of people will say, oh, you shouldn't count notional value because once the derivatives have expired, once the contracts have expired and it nets down, it's actually 500 trillion or something like that. So it's like they don't even agree how to value this stuff, but it's big numbers.
Don't ask me to take a stab at trying to explain it. That's not going to happen on this show.
What do you usually talk about on this show, Scott? Bitcoin?
Mostly Bitcoin, yeah.
How have you been enjoying it? How long has the podcast been going for?
This is episode number 65.
Oh, nice.
So, we've been going for about a year and a half and tons of fun. One of the things that I think is so neat about Bitcoin is how many sort of sub-disciplines, like there's kind of every show, every week, the guest is quite a bit different from the week before, except for the 2 weeks where we had Lavish and Larry Lepard on the next week. But
that must have been a fun one.
Yeah, I think, there's, so for the listeners, hopefully too, there's, topics that appeal to different people. So, we've done episodes about Bitcoin and health. We've done big episodes about Bitcoin and art. We've done more of the kind of traditional, how do you think about Bitcoin as an investment, the tech, what's going on with Lightning and how is adoption going to work in the real world?
Which one was like the most listened to episode?
Oh, I would say probably our Jeff Booth episode, but I don't think that it had anything to do so much with the episode, but there's just a lot of Jeff Booth fans out there, including myself. One episode that did really well that I talked about frequently was Tony Yazbeck from the Bitcoin Way. We did an episode with Tony in September that was awesome. Tony's story of having his wealth confiscated by the Lebanese central bank. And what ensued after that is quite a story. And he's really turned it into something, a silver lining with the work that he's doing with Bitcoin Way.
Cool. I've never heard that before. I never heard of him or the Bitcoin Way. I'll have to listen to the episode and get caught up.
Yeah, that one is definitely one of my favorites.
That's another, there's so many new, exciting people joining the network and starting businesses and certain podcasts and just a lot of positive inevitability that's going on in Bitcoin. And that was another thing that was for me earlier this year. I was just I don't need to be in Bitcoin anymore. You know what I mean? In Bitcoin, Bitcoin doesn't need us, me and you and whoever. We could just take a step back and just work on our lives and just save in Bitcoin and just use that 40% CAGR as a growth engine for our lives and just kind of grow with Bitcoin. And not have to be out following the news and following politics and getting triggered and, wasting time on screens. So that when I kind of thought about that and I stepped back, I was like, that's great. And it just became more, before I was operating from a place of fear, oh, so we got to all be in the trenches arguing with the no coiners and debating with the shit coiners and all that stuff. And I was like, no, nobody needs to do that. The people coming in are volunteering to do that. And you know what I mean? Saylor and Larry Fink and all these massive influential people, they influence millions of people themselves. And they're talking positively about Bitcoin, whether they get full Bitcoin sovereignty as a value stack or whatever. I'm sure Saylor does, but even if they don't, Bitcoin's just growing without anybody needing to be growing it anymore. Before it felt it was a duty to be in the trenches trying to make sure we're defending Bitcoin. But the immune system is kind of autonomous now. Nobody needs to really do it. You're just choosing to do it. So that was a nice realization. Then I could actually take that advice that Michael Saylor gave last year. You could talk about it quite a bit about being cheerful and constructive. And I took that to heart and I kind of wrote it down on a calendar reminder. Every day I would see a list of values that I'm trying to like instill in my life and change my mindset, because I was a little bit too much, I had negative inputs coming in and kind of painting my worldview. And so I was like, okay, I took a whole bunch of stuff and I was writing the things that I want to see and I want to do. And that was one of the core ones. It was cheerful and constructive. And I know I got a lot of engagement on Twitter for like bashing shit coins and all that stuff, but it's like kind of toxic for the mindset to be always thinking about that and talking about it, paying attention to it. So that's been a big lift for me this year. It's like, hey, let's just focus on all the positive stuff. And like, there's so many interesting people in Bitcoin and so many interesting things left and so much to do. There's going to be millions of people coming into Bitcoin over the next, by this time next Christmas. So why not just focus on engaging with all the people that want, or they're like raising their hand like, hey, I want to learn about Bitcoin. So that's been my shift this year. Instead of like trying to fight the ordinals, block space spamming and all that, like whatever people are getting worked up about, like, let's just like, I'm going to focus on just the people that want to learn more about Bitcoin. And for me, that was a big positive boost for me, because I was like removed most of the negative inputs that were coming into my mind and just kind of like switched it to positive ones. So if anybody out there is listening and they're stuck in that, like debating with crypto people, or like they're, I got a guy here in the local meetup group who's just obsessed with ordinals, and he's like Bitcoin maximalist, but he's just cannot stop talking about ordinals and stuff. I was like, dude, like your mindset is just being completely warped by this. It's a meaningless thing. Like Bitcoin's inevitable. This is like, focus on all the people in your life that give away some sats for Christmas or something like that, and help your family and friends get in some, get a wallet going. Like, don't be wasting all your time yelling about ordinals all the time. Like there's so many people that want to learn about Bitcoin.
Yeah. And you're busy learning about baseball cards on Bitcoin. Yeah, I agree with you. I think, it also creates a much more inviting message. The idea of just being more positive and welcoming, whereas, sometimes certain sects of Bitcoiners can get a bit of a bad rap for being too zealous. I don't know what the right word might be.
Well, it's partly stems from all that sort of like baggage from the block size wars and stuff, where we felt like, we had to defend Bitcoin against the insiders who were turning against Bitcoin. And then this has been talked about a lot. I don't need to repeat it, but like then there was like a lot of people who got ripped off by ICO scamming and stuff in 2018, 19. They kind of became Bitcoin maximalists through getting posed by the venture capitalists and the shitcoin grift, and they became Bitcoin maximalists. And then they like kind of learned about the block size wars and tried to like, pick up the sword and stuff, but there was like no real enemy to fight. So they're just like fighting in the town square rather than on the battlefield. And so like, there's a lot of people that kind of like make a battle out of something that's just a little scuffle. And it's like, the desire to be like out there fighting for Bitcoin and defending Bitcoin, when really like, if you want to be a crusading Bitcoiner, just go out and, work to educate people in your life about Bitcoin, and maybe start a podcast if you want. But I don't think the way to think about it really is like, look at the way that Michael Saylor has shifted. Like he was originally a little bit toxic in terms of like, there is no second best, that whole thing. But he became like, okay, I'm going to focus on cheerfully and constructively staying in my lane. When they would ask him about Dogecoin on the news, he would just say, I'm just going to stay in my lane. I'm just going to talk about Bitcoin. He wouldn't bash Dogecoin. You know what I mean? He would just, let's talk about Bitcoin. So that philosophy netted him the success that he's got right now, because he stayed focused on Bitcoin rather than letting the distraction of blah, blah, blah distract him away from the positive benefits of like being an evangelist for Bitcoin. So you can be like a crusading Bitcoiner, because Bitcoin is the most productive protest that there is in the world. Like not only do you get to protest the injustice that you see in the world and the scam that is fiat and the rigged game of macro, but you get rich doing it. So like just, you can have that sort of like activist mindset, but you just focus on Bitcoin rather than what you don't want, which is like, oh, I don't want the shitcoins to win, or I don't want the ordinals to spam the blockchain. It's like, that's the negative framing that people get stuck into, that I was stuck into. That's why I'm talking about it so much, I guess. Thank you for doing this therapy session with me, Scott. I appreciate it.
This one's free. First one's free.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Saylor's a great example too of and Jeff. I mean, like anybody, even the people who get the most attention as kind of like Bitcoin spokespeople are still themselves understanding it better and better all the time. Like, so I think with Saylor, you've seen an evolution in how he talks about it. He used to have these sort of very, very abstract metaphors. Bitcoin is an arc of energy on the ship, on the ocean of money, and would lose people, right? And now he's sort of dialed into this really crisp way of talking about Bitcoin as being the innovation of digital capital, money that doesn't age, money that doesn't decay. It's a refined way of expressing. I think obviously he gets so much practice with it, right? But yeah, it's neat to see.
Yeah, and since it's Christmas Eve, that was really good to hear him talk yesterday about Bitcoin hitting $1 million. No, I'm just kidding.
We're recording this in advance. That would be quite a Christmas gift. That would be.
Imagine that would be then suddenly.
Yeah, it does make me wonder. I think between the time we record this and the episode airs, there will be a vote by Amazon. And surely one of these announcements will move the needle. I'm surprised about how much Bitcoin MicroStrategy has been able to buy without really moving the price. However they're doing it is a mystery and something that I'm very interested in. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I just from living through the previous cycles of Bitcoin, when did you get in first, Scott?
So I'm kind of the person that you were describing earlier. I got into the 2020 cycle and, did okay. I've never told this story on the show. I was sitting cozy and I made the decision to store my proceeds from the last cycle in the Terra Luna protocol. And I was going to just sort of live on the yield that the UST stablecoin was kicking out, and which was like 20% interest or hot air. So for listeners who don't know what happened there, Luna spectacularly collapsed in 24 hours and erased like, I don't know, 50 or $100 billion of notional wealth. And I was swept away partially in that. And so from then forth, that was how I became a Bitcoin maxi and sort of set myself forward to the path I'm on now.
I didn't know that. Well, that's sorry to hear that, but we all find our own path to Bitcoin only, right? And I've been ripped off by people, lost in the Mt. Gox exchange and all kinds of dumb mistakes that I made. And even kind of looping it back to the conversation, like I was yelling about to Terra Luna for 6 months, actually a year and a half. I remember because in 2020, I started talking about like the looping and the unsustainability of it. And I just was obsessed with Celsius and Luna and like all these things that were just way too risky and were going to blow up. And in the end, I was like, after it all blew up, I was like, I was right. But like, I wasted a year and a half of my life kind of focusing on that stuff. Like, obviously I was focused on Bitcoin too, but I did save probably like friends, probably $10 million or $15 million or something from losing in Celsius and Terra Luna and BlockFi and FTX, probably more. Like, I don't know who actually took my advice, but like, I've had people DM me and be like, I got out like 2 days before because I was following your Twitter. So like, and a friend of mine, he had $10 million in Celsius and I was like convinced them to get it out of there. So like, I had helped people there, but like, it's in the end, it was like, so was that worth it? Like, I don't know. I helped rich people not lose their money, but I should have spent my time helping like poor people like get Bitcoin as fast as they possibly could. So yeah, I'm sorry to hear that you were caught up in that one. But like, again, this is what I kind of suspected was going to happen, was like 2025 was going to be like in 2021. I tweeted this out. I was like, shitcoiners create bear markets create Bitcoiners create bull markets, and bull markets create shitcoiners. And it's just a cycle. It keeps happening over and over. And that meme blew up and everybody else started using it. So I got to inspire a meme that people started using, but it's so true. Like everybody that gets caught in the FOMO and the yield and the ICOs and the DeFi and the meme coins and all this stuff, they get caught up and then they lose a bunch of money. And then we go into the bear market and then they realize Bitcoin's the way. And then some of them come out of that, like Michael Saylor or Jack Dorsey or, Corey Clipston or whatever, like all these like influential nodes in Bitcoin. The guy from recently, he's kind of Sotheby's, like the Sotheby's founder or whatever. He's talking about Bitcoin, So we keep like now you, right? Like you are now an influential force in Bitcoin. And a lot of people that get kind of their second wind or whatever to get back in and make a difference and promote the values of Bitcoin. That's what grows Bitcoin over the next epoch. It's like, yes, new people coming and finding their way to Bitcoin and like understanding it and then becoming like a Jack Mallers or something like that. We got those too. They didn't necessarily go into altcoins and ICOs. They just came in, they got influenced by the right Bitcoin maximalists, they got inspired, they built something amazing. Actually, Shazan is from Lava is one of these examples. Like he's going to be a big influence, I think, in the next cycle of Bitcoin because he was a young guy, like just out of university in 2020, 2021, something like that. He was building Lava, he was raising money actually for Lava, which is like a lending protocol, a Bitcoin lending protocol. And he had reached out to me because he'd listened to my podcast and he's like, "Oh, I heard you're investing in Bitcoin companies. Would you like to back me?" And I had a conversation with him. I really liked what he was saying. Smart kid. He's like, all of my friends are trying to do Ethereum, crypto, DeFi stuff in university because the Ethereum Foundation goes to the university, sets up shop there and tries to recruit them all to go build on Solidity and starts giving them money to start building shitcoins. And he was like, he saw through that and he was like, that's not what I want to do. I want to build something with Bitcoin because he listened to like, I don't know how many podcasts am I, maybe one, I don't know, like maybe he didn't even, but like he definitely said the right things to get me to want to invest. But I know that he was inspired by like probably Jack Mallers and what Bitcoin did and like Jack Dorsey and stuff like that. So it's cool to see these kids that are coming up and they have principles and ethics and they choose Bitcoin because it's like they see the path that's the right thing to build on. And then anyways, I invested in his company and then now 2 years later, he's ready to launch it. And he just got a news broke that the Founders Fund and Coastal Ventures invested and led the Series A. So that's like two major Silicon Valley companies like Peter Thiel's fund. And, it's just exciting to see. And when asked to, like, it's not that they're just broadly allocating into crypto again. They're actually like investing in him because he's a principal Bitcoiner and he's using Bitcoin technology. And they solved the problems with FTX and Celsius and Terra Luna and all that stuff because it was all custodial risk and hot air and just financialization nonsense with like looping tokenomic stuff. And they're like, no, this is a specific founder with principles building using non-custodial Bitcoin technology. We want to back that. So like, that's extremely exciting to me to see now that even the like Silicon Valley investors are starting to value the Bitcoin ethos, the Bitcoin only ethos. And like Lava uses DLCs. So if you want to borrow against your Bitcoin, you basically lock your Bitcoin into a DLC where there's only two output conditions. One is if you don't pay back your loan, the lender gets the Bitcoin. And one is if you do pay back your loan, you get the Bitcoin. So there's not really counterparty risk. There is a little bit of counterparty risk with like the blinded oracles thing, but I mean, it's like kind of technical. This isn't a podcast about Lava. I guess I'm just saying like, it's cool to see Bitcoin technology stuff this cycle is getting the spotlight where last year was like, where last cycle was BlockFi, it was like, we'll take your Bitcoin and give you money. Now it's like use Bitcoin technology in a non-custodial, non-KYC way to borrow against it. And in that way, this goes back. I like to loop everything around in. This goes back into the question of like, why, with MicroStrategy buying so much, like how is the price not mooning as much as it probably should? Well, it's because the previous 4 epochs of Bitcoin, I've seen it happen, right? Where we break this like psychological barrier of the previous all-time high. And my friends, in say 2016, who suffered through the Mt. Gox collapse and held their Bitcoin from $1,000 to like 200 and then all the way back up to 1,000. They're just like, I'm finally back in the black. I got to sell some Bitcoin. And so you get these people who've been holding since 2010 that had missed their chance, when they bought Bitcoin at $1 and they missed their chance to sell for 1,000x at $1,000. And then they suffered through an 80% drawdown, second or third one of their life. And then it's finally back up. They're like, I'm taking some money off the table this time. and they sell some Bitcoin. And like, that's still happening this time. It's just people bought maybe at $100. They went in heavy, and then they suffered through 2 or 3 90% drawdowns. 100K is a psychological level where it's like they're up maybe 100x, or, in some cases you go in with size at like $20,000. You probably want to take a 5x and, take your 100 million or whatever if you're a big whale. So there's a lot of people selling into the momentum of this run because it's just like they're just nervous that it's not going to keep going. They don't have the conviction, whatever it is. And the main reason is if you're all in on Bitcoin and you're using Bitcoin, proceeds of Bitcoin sales to fund your lifestyle, like you have to sell Bitcoin. So a lot of Bitcoin maximalists that are like heavy in Bitcoin are kind of facing this decision of like, I would like to buy my dream home, or I would like to pay off my mortgage on my normal middle class home. I would like to buy a nice car. I would like to start a business, whatever it is. They want to spend they'd sell some Bitcoin and, upgrade the lifestyle. Well, in the epochs following, there's going to be way more options for minimal counterparty risk ways to borrow against your Bitcoin and fund your lifestyle with reasonably low interest rates. And in that world, I believe there's going to be less sell pressure from people who've been hodling for a couple of, like an epoch, say, right? Like 4 years or more. Because now instead of selling your Bitcoin and paying huge capital gains taxes, you'll be able to just borrow against your Bitcoin, fund your lifestyle at a reasonable interest rate. And, if it's like 5% interest or something, you can find a way to pay that off, or even sell a little bit of Bitcoin to pay off the interest instead of a big chunk to fund your lifestyle for 3 years or buy the house or whatever it is. And a lot of us don't like all in Bitcoiners. We are not credit worthy to a bank. So I had this problem when trying to upgrade my home. I'm like, I can't get a mortgage. Like, it's so hard to get a mortgage. They think I'm just a homeless guy, like with this crazy beard. They're just like, oh, you're unemployed and you can't afford a razor. Like, we're not going to give you a mortgage. So like that problem's going to get solved too. So there's a lot of sell pressure from just people that have been in Bitcoin a lot. They're convicted. They're on the Bitcoin mission. They're still keeping a lot of Bitcoin, but they're just selling because it's like, the smart wisdom is to just nobody goes broke by taking profits. It's one of those tropes, like take out your principal play with the house's money. Nobody goes broke taking profits, sell your winners, like these sort of things are, sell on a double. They're just like colloquial nonsense philosophies that if you're not convicted in your investment thesis over long term, you're going to take this conventional wisdom and it's going to weigh on you and you're going to sell. You're going to sell and, regret it later. But in the next epoch, we're going to have lots of ways for Bitcoiners to get mortgages and get good loans with Bitcoin as collateral. And whether you want to use it with a bank or you want to do it in a non-custodial, like Bitcoin ethos way, there's like options like Lava. Debify is another one out of Switzerland. The guys from Hodl Hodl, Max, he created Debify, which is like a way to pair you with like Swiss banks, institutional Swiss banks, to borrow against your Bitcoin, and you put your Bitcoin in a multi-sig. I also invested in that company because like I didn't borrow on BlockFi and all this stuff last cycle. I was telling everybody not to because of rehypothecation. You don't know what they're going to do with that. In fact, I was telling everybody, I know what they're doing with that. They're going and giving it to Three Arrows Capital, who's going pumping Avalanche and looping it in through Celsius or through Anchor and Terra Luna and all this shit. So like, what they were doing. They were just taking billions of dollars of Bitcoin and just pumping shitcoin DeFi protocols and burning yield with it, right? So it's like, that's not sustainable. So like, I was like, I need to put my money where my mouth is. And I started backing Bitcoiners that were trying to build lending protocols using Bitcoin. So I didn't put a lot in, but like a couple of companies that I saw that were doing it, like, yes, I want to support that because that's going to be so valuable. There's going to be obviously Cantor Fitzgerald and things like that become options for doing it with banks. But I also want to see Bitcoiners starting companies and being able to do it in a Bitcoin way. So I guess I'm just very confident in the future that like when these options are more understood and ubiquitous, like MicroStrategy is just going to be buying Bitcoin and the Bitcoiners are not going to be selling. We're going to be just borrowing. And then like that is when the supply constraint thing really comes into play. Because when you don't need to sell to fund your lifestyle and upgrade your lifestyle and the rates are low enough, it's just who's going to sell? But you know what I mean? So that's why I'm kind of excited for the next epoch and the next 10 years. Like as this, I just don't understand how it doesn't become like $1 million plus global reserve asset. Like MicroStrategy is likely going to get accepted into like the NASDAQ or the S&P. And then all the passive inflows are going to hit Bitcoin. So it's inevitable.
Yeah, it's quite a story. I think about my own life, kind of getting back to that loop. And for a lot of people, I think of it as sort of like tuition in Bitcoin University. And I was sort of happy retrospectively to have the outcome I did, because one of the things that experience really did for me was help me truly value what Bitcoin is and why it's important. And having not been through that, I don't think I would have been in a position to understand the importance of helping other people do it too. So everybody has a different road in. As sort of overseeing a Bitcoin build in the same way, I think you have to really have internalized that ethos for it to become the fabric of a real Bitcoin business. And that's just something you can't fake either. So
totally. It's very common, man. Like I've talked to a bunch of Bitcoin founders. This is the one that I always talk about on my podcast because I brought the founder of Galloway Money onto my podcast. They're the company that created the Bitcoin Beach wallet. And so the Bitcoin Beach wallet was like the wallet that led to Bitcoin adopting, or El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as legal tender, right? It was kind of fueled that whole Bitcoin Beach story. Like they had their own wallet and people could save in it. So that was created by Galloway. They were like, Galloway had that product and then it spun out as its own thing. Now it's its own company, but it was part of Galloway. And the founder of Galloway was like a 2017 ICO guy. Like he came into blockchain. He didn't come into Bitcoin. He was in the VR industry. He was like creating cutting edge VR technology. And he's like, I want to be doing something more bleeding edge. So he's like, oh, blockchain looks interesting. And he launched one of those, like at the time, it was like a top 100 crypto coin blockchain thing. And so he raised something like $100 million or something crazy for this blockchain thing. Or like, I don't know if it was 100, maybe it was 10. I don't know. It was a lot of money. And then 2018 happens. He kind of realized like, wait a second, this is not where the bleeding edge is. This is like Wall Street on a blockchain. This is not what I want to be doing. I want to be helping people, and this is not helping people. So he thought more deeply about it, and he realized like Lightning Network was the bleeding edge. It wasn't blockchain. And so he then dove all in and became like one of the driving forces behind El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. So yeah, I see a lot. There's a lot of, we can even talk about like Max Kaiser was like had Max coin back in the day. You know what I mean? So, which hopefully he doesn't listen to this because he doesn't like when people talk about that. But it was just like just sort of like fun thing. See, the thing people don't realize is back in those days, like there was no contentious thing around launching an altcoin back in like 2013, 14. Everybody was messing around with it.
Yeah, a lot of Bitcoiners were excited about ETH, right?
Well, it was just like people were just like experimenting and messing around. It wasn't like I'm going to launch an altcoin and then it's going to beat Bitcoin. Like now it's not even now. There was this period, maybe 2017 to 2022, where like they were like trying to beat Bitcoin. Like they were piling in and like Ripple, say, investing in attack ads on Bitcoin and trying to do lawfare and, influence politicians to write laws that would restrict proof of work. Like that is where that got really super contentious from the block size wars and the ICOs, like on to say the collapse of the last cycle. And then it kind of became more like, okay, everybody understands Bitcoin is king. And now it's like Bitcoin and crypto. It's not like blockchain, not Bitcoin. So it was like there was a period in the early days when launching your own coin was just like something you did for fun. And it wasn't seen as like a get rich quick scam or a grift. It was just like everybody was like doing stocks on the blockchain and all this stupid stuff. And so when they did that, it was just like a marketing stunt, really. And then, it went nowhere. But like people will come and look, and then they'll look at that nowadays and they'll point to that and they're like, oh, Max Kaiser did Max Coin. He was a scammer and he never apologized. And it was like, just let it go. It was like 10 years ago and it was just not even, he wasn't even really part of it. But anyways, the point being, like, a lot of people like yourself that didn't just immediately come into Bitcoin become influential nodes in the Bitcoin ethos and promoting the Bitcoin only message. And it actually, like in some ways, like, you learn those lessons and it kind of strengthens your conviction on why Bitcoin matters. And honestly, like I thought about this a couple of times too, like given the market of today and the confusion around what this is, I don't know if I came into Bitcoin now that I would go right to Bitcoin. Like I try to put myself in the mindset of an entrepreneur. Like maybe I built a successful business and I know how to generate revenue and I'm not so sure about the history of money and like what's the difference between stocks and gold and real estate. It's just all just investments. And then you're like, this Bitcoin thing is also an investment. Oh, and crypto is a thing too. And there's like stable coins and there's yield and stuff. So I like, a lot of Bitcoiners, we like to think of ourselves as like, oh, we're Bitcoin maximalists and we got it right. But like, it's because you got the experience of the however many years and hours and hours and hours of research you put into it. You got to be a little bit more empathetic when new people are coming into the space and they're being told by the president of the United States that like their shitcoin is worth investing in, or like, the favorite influencer or whatever. So I've kind of become a lot more kind of empathetic about that. And I realized that my reaction is a reflection. So I tried to go in a little deeper and realize like, oh, I actually probably wouldn't make the right decision. If I just came straight into Bitcoin, I'd be like, that'd be a miracle. Because I came into Bitcoin like pumped up and excited about I could just mine Bitcoins on my computer. Like I could literally, you open the Bitcoin program, you click start mining. You know what I mean? It was like, I couldn't mine much on a CPU, but you plug a GPU in and you're actually mining some Bitcoin. And then you get a rack of GPUs and you're getting 2 Bitcoin a day. And I was like, that's so exciting that I could just like make free magic internet money by just turning on my computer and paying the power bill. It's amazing. So it was like a little bit of a FOMO thing that was still a part of Bitcoin back in the day that sucked me in and a lot of people like me. And that's the same energy that meme coins and yield stuff. It's like, oh, I can just park my money here and get 20%. Like, hell yeah, let's pile in on this thing. This is exciting. It's the future of money, right? You totally get it. Like, I could totally see it.
So maybe as a way to like wrap as a final thought, if there's one thing that you would think somebody who's trying to understand this stuff now getting in today, what is the one thing somebody who's trying to make sense of everything should be thinking about?
That's a tough one, man. Like, I'm still trying to figure that out myself. I'm trying to dial in the message because a lot of people have Dunning-Kruger where they are successful in their business. They know how to make money. So then they think they also know a lot about money. And when you try to warn them about like, hey, you're probably going to get rug pulled on this, they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, and because a lot of Bitcoiners we kind of tend towards like not deferring to authorities or whatever, like appealing to authority. It's like, we're not going to say like, I know better than you, because it's like, there's no leader in Bitcoin. We are all Satoshi. Like all this, it's like, well, I guess, you're going to learn the lesson, but don't say I didn't tell you when you come asking me like, hey, what do I do now? Yeah, I don't really think I have great advice. I mean, aside from, which I always tell everybody on my Instagram feed, because I've been starting to spend a lot more time on Instagram trying to influence my entrepreneur friends and stuff towards Bitcoin only and learning about Bitcoin and studying Bitcoin rather than buying crypto or investing in Bitcoin even. It's just like study Bitcoin, save in Bitcoin, trying to just continually hit them with that reframing Bitcoin as a savings technology. And that whole thing about this is like not a get rich quick trend that you're hopping on. This is a don't get poor slowly strategy that you should be thinking about, because inflation is crushing you. And unless you want to become a full-time crypto trader, and be on Telegram groups buying rug pulls 40 hours a week, we probably would just want to simplify things and just study Bitcoin, save in Bitcoin, and don't even need to be spending more than like a couple hours a week. Just like listen, find a good Bitcoin podcast that's like a Bitcoin only person and just keep listening to episodes. And then as your conviction grows, just buy more Bitcoin. And, I'm on Instagram as Brad Mills Can, the same as I am on Twitter. And I'm always posting 3 stories a day because I've been inspired by Dan Martell this year. He lives in the same city as you, and he does entrepreneur coaching. So I joined it because I wanted to get fit, and I wanted to I wanted to embody the proof of work lifestyle. I wanted to look like my Bitcoin wallet and feel like my Bitcoin wallet. I had financial success, but I didn't have success in the other areas of my life. So I hired him as a coach, and I hired a couple more coaches. I hired a fitness coach from Kelowna as well, Alan Dick. And so I got changed my life this year through doing these things. And the ethos now is like, okay, I'm going to try to just influence people through being the example, through showing my proof of work. So I'm going to post about Bitcoin knowledge. I'm going to post about getting fit and spending time with my daughter and my wife and having a healthy lifestyle. And hopefully that will influence people to be like, hey, what's this Brad guy talking about Bitcoin anyways? I better take a look at this Bitcoin thing. And so I post like 2 or 3 stories a day of just workouts or Bitcoin knowledge or whatever. I answer questions on there too. So I'll post a little box where it's like, hey, got any questions about Bitcoin? Hit me up. When I first started doing it a few months ago, nobody would ask me a question. And now I'm getting like 3-4 questions a day or a time. I do it once a week. So I'm dialing in my pitch for them because I am trying to figure that out. How do we get entrepreneurs to get Bitcoin, to grok Bitcoin? Because that's going to be a huge force over the next 5 years. And things like what you're doing, I'm so excited about that because we get Bitcoin as a savings technology for businesses and for entrepreneurs to really grok Bitcoin and start using it as the retirement plan for their staff. That's network effects that's going to pay dividends. So getting entrepreneurs to think about Bitcoin as a savings technology, as a don't get poor slowly technology, rather than oh, my buddy's launching an NFT and I'm getting into crypto. What should I buy? Or whatever. It's this get rich quick mentality. It's just trying to reframe it for them. But the flashing lights of the casino, obviously they do it for a reason, right? So it's a long-term game. Trying to influence these entrepreneurs and stuff towards Bitcoin.
It is, yeah. And I guess the best we can do is help as many people as we can, as fast as we can, and hope that other people follow us along the way, which is the best part about Bitcoin. Like you said, very few boundaries for recruitment when adopting it as a lifestyle and a savings technology is just beneficial for everyone who touches it. This has been a ton of fun, Brad. Maybe we'll wrap there. I want to thank you for coming on the show, and we will include in the show notes the links to your Instagram page, your Twitter page. Anything else you want us to share? Or
just final Christmas Eve advice: ho ho hodl, don't sell your Bitcoin or you get a lump of coal.
So if you're listening, I want to thank you. I
just made that up. Wasn't that amazing?
I liked it. Yeah, it was good. Thanks again for tuning in, and hope everyone listening has a great holiday season, and hope to see you again next week.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Block Reward. We're trying to do something different here, creating accessible conversations meant for people who aren't obsessed with Bitcoin. If you found this episode informative and engaging, hit that subscribe button to make sure you stay updated with future episodes. Your feedback matters. We'd greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to share your reviews and help us with our goal of creating Bitcoin content that is simple and easy to understand. Bitcoin has an important role to play in the future of finance. It will change the way we save, spend, and invest. Discover why Bitcoin offers a game-changing opportunity for forward-thinking employers by visiting blockrewards.ca. Block Rewards' mission is helping Canadian employers implement strategies for integrating Bitcoin into compensation and benefits, supercharge your recruitment and retention strategies, and help your team members plan for the rising cost of living by rewarding their work with the hardest money ever invented. Special thanks to our top sponsor, Paramount Employee Benefits Consulting, Canada's only Bitcoin forward benefits and pension advisory. For more information, find them at paramountbenefits.ca. Big shout out to Podigy, our production team that makes all this possible, and BMX Escape for producing our music. Bitcoin is an expansive and dense topic many people walk away from early. To Bitcoin enthusiasts looking for that podcast they can share with friends, family, and colleagues, one they'll actually listen to, we hope that is us. The content of these conversations is meant to be provided for information purposes only. Nothing here is investment advice. Bitcoin is a big topic. Be sure to do your own research before making any personal financial decisions. Thanks for listening.